Good morning. Good morning. I'm getting so used to going live in the afternoon on a Friday that I almost said good afternoon. But to my guest, Clayton, it is a good afternoon. So, welcome back to Virtual Coffee with Francois. Nice to have you with us on this Tuesday morning. I'm excited about talking to Clayton this morning. So those of you that don't know, he's the MD of XY Advisor down in Australia. And, sometimes we're not arch enemies. It's only on the rugby field and sometimes on the cricket field. But, I'm very, very happy to have him here and really looking forward to getting into this conversation with him. So good morning. Welcome, everybody. Now, thank you for joining us. I see there's quite a few comments already. So let me just quickly say good morning to you. It's Terence in the house. Good morning, Terence, Chart and Malcolm, Ian McMaster, Renee, Razan, Kobus Klein, Louis van der Merwe. Louis, thank you. You put me in touch with Clayton, so thank you very much for that. Jaco Roots, Salome, Louis, Gatsi Andy, Dani Malan, Stephen Nell, Mike Kidwell, Mark, also from Australia. Mark, welcome. Nice to see you in the house again. And so good morning. Very nice to have you here. And really looking forward to today's discussion. We're really going to get into, how things are changing and how rapidly things are changing, but also then what Clayton is seeing, how is financial planning expanding across the world, not only in Australia or in certain pockets, but really all over the world. He's also got XY Advisor's also got a podcast where he gets to interview people like I do. And, there's lots of interesting conversations. And again, talking to international advisors, there's so much to learn from what's happening. So on that note, let me welcome to the show this morning Clayton Daniel. Clayton, good morning, all the way from Sydney in Australia. Very nice to have you with us.
Mate, it is really cool to be here. I'm really impressed by how different this is to most online chats that I have. So hello to everyone. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good stuff, man. It is. It's quite a thing. And if I look back like where we started and why I started, it's like we've come a long way. This is episode 84 of this. We used to go live daily. I didn't share this with you when we had a chat yesterday. We went live daily, and then at some point, it was only supposed to be for lockdown. So it was supposed to be for 21 days, and then 21 days became 35, became 60. And then somewhere in the 70s, I decided, okay, I need to get back to work as well. So now we're going live twice a week, but that's still cool. We'll keep on doing that, until my breath leaves my body, I guess. Clayton, so happy to have you with us this morning. I think there's so many interesting things that we want to get into and that we want to share with the audience. As you saw, there's this. Mark is from Australia. He's been watching this show for quite a while, so that's amazing. So I've also got Renata, and Neil, and Kevin, and Yiku, and Kuketsu in the house as well. And so really looking forward to this. And let's get started with this whole conversation. And just a brief background on how did you get involved into financial services or financial planning? What was your journey? Where did you start? And then how did you get to where you are today? And then we'll get into the rest of the story.
Yeah. So I started out in tax. I did 3 years in tax accounting, and I got really comfortable with charging a fee in exchange for advice and service. And I remember someone sort of saying to me once, if you are interested in this type of work, then if you want to extend the amount of advice that you give beyond 1 year, right? Because tax is very much sort of limited to what we call a financial year over here. It's sort of 1st of July to 30 June, but it's different all around the world. But tax is very limited to that 12 months. And if you want to extend it further, and for someone's entire life potentially, that's called financial advice. And that sounded really appealing. So made the transition, came across into a really sort of technical legislative role, coming from tax sort of into that. I kind of got funneled into that position, then power planning, and ultimately then starting my own company. I spent a year sort of in an academy of sorts. Over here, our Alan Gray, I know Alan Gray is really big over there. So our Alan Gray was called AMP, and AMP sort of would push many advisors into the industry. And so coming from a really technical background, went through a year of this AMP and then started a business off the back of that, which lasted for about 4 years. And I had some really good advice around me, or really good mentors, I should say. And they kind of put it to me with sort of XY gaining a little bit of momentum on the side. They sort of said, are you an entrepreneur or are you an advisor? And I think they were trying to get me to drop XY, but I end up selling the business.
Yeah. That's how most stories go, right? It's like we all do something, and that's also actually what I think happened to me in a sense, is that I thought like my natural progression would go into becoming a financial advisor, which I did. And then I didn't really hop from joy and, like do all the Sound of Music, like heel clicking and all that kind of stuff. But I still had a love for the industry. And then I got involved in this training thing. And then eventually 2 years after that, I sold my practice and I decided to go full-time into this whole training and consulting setup. So, and also, by the way, so we've got a tax practice. So you and I didn't realize that we actually have a very similar kind of, storyline maybe. I think
tax accountants.
Yeah. So, so very interesting. But then sort of XY started taking on its own life and it obviously became a thing. And I guess through that you are getting exposed to quite a variety of different kind of approaches and people doing things differently. And this one thing, there's been a lot of talk recently. There's been some summits and webinars, and there's a lot of talk. If you go to anywhere where there's a talk being held on a stage, there's this thing called life stage financial planning, or just lifestyle financial planning, or financial therapy, financial coaching. There's all these names, and it feels like a lot of them are actually the same thing, but we're trying to distinguish what we're doing through what we're calling this. And in my mind, I've always thought about this, but surely we've been doing a lot of this, for a long time. I don't know. What are your view on that? Is this whole coaching? Let's just talk about financial coaching, lifestyle financial planning. Is this the new thing? Is it a separate thing? Have we always done this? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I'd say pockets of advisors over decades have been doing exactly that, which you've just mentioned. I think the difference now is with the communication and the global conversation that's going on with advice right now, and will continue to and accelerate as far as I'm aware, is bringing a lot of these dispersed findings that have been occurring all together. And so what I mean by that is, as an advisor, you learn everything to do with financial life relatively early in the piece, right? So you learn insurance, you learn retirement products, you learn investment products, you might learn mortgages, you might learn about cash flow, but that's kind of where the training ends. And the reason why the training ends, especially in the early career there, is because, well, at least in this country, but I suspect it's probably the same over there, you need to provide a formal piece of written advice so that you're able to receive a revenue from the product provider which was recommended. Is that pretty close to South African?
Yep. Sounds extremely familiar. Yes.
Yeah, because so that's a kind of a global phenomena, and so the reason why that has been what financial planning has been considered is because, well, ultimately, powerful stakeholders that weren't the advisors were kind of influencing what advice should be, so that this formal piece of written advice can be given, so that a product can be issued, and so that revenue can be earned by via a third party for the advisor. I would say, due to Australia being kind of the, I guess, our regulatory framework has, over the last decade, gone through an immense amount of structural change. So much pressure has been put on advisors, and it's been forced. This what David Haynes, who is a very successful planner in Australia and now sort of teaches around the world, he put it to me as in this idea of above the line and below the line. And the reason is because if you consider the below the line as the classic financial planning stuff, it's that is the piece that's constantly getting disrupted, whether it's from the top down government, the regulatory, whether it's the bottom up tech, right? There's always something coming after this financial planning traditional skill set. And so Australia being, I guess, under the pressure for so long in this place has really pushed forward, and I would say progressed rapidly. So we've probably seen a huge amount of progress in the last couple of years, which has blown my mind, right? So I'm mid-30s, and the type of practice that I had, and I only sold a couple of years ago, but the type of practice I had was very progressive at the time. And this is only a couple of years ago. And I thought the way that I would refer to it was a financial and lifestyle management framework. However, it has nothing, or it had nothing on where the conversations I'm now having with advisors. And it's not because I was doing anything new. I just didn't know anyone else that was doing it. That's kind of how XY ended up coming around. Me and a bunch of buddies were like, how do we learn about this sort of stuff? How do we get access? But what I've found is, and maybe it's just the hunt is on more, but there's a lot of people, you're exactly right. This has actually been happening for a long time. I would say there's probably just more of a coming together of these ideologies, which is crystallizing in more and more advisors' minds. And in my opinion, is going to launch advice into a new phase of higher value for the clients, of higher revenue for advisors. And ultimately, what every single person on this call is mostly interested in, seeing a genuine change in the lives of collectively thousands and potentially millions of people.
Yes. And but does this mean, like, if we're shifting this thing from below the line to above the line, as you referred to, and I know if you saw like the thumbnail, I was like very particular in putting that line between between the words, because I knew we were going to talk about this. But what I want to ask you is, like, so is the stuff that's happening below the line, call it the traditional or classic financial planning, the technical stuff, the investment planning, the retirement planning, the product solutions, you know, all that stuff, is that becoming less important, or is that still as critical as it was before?
Oh yeah, goodness, yeah. So that you would never want to replace that or remove that from financial advice. If you remove that, you wouldn't be at least to my mind, you wouldn't be a financial planner anymore. So absolutely, I think to ignore what is traditional advice and to not put your clients in the 100% better financial position, that is mandatory. That is a ticket to the game, and I don't want to see any relaxation on the effort and the skills being put into that part of advice. I guess my only point is that's realistically 99% of the conversations and the training that I've ever seen about financial planning is this below the line traditional how to put your client in a better financial position, in a more superior financial position. So I want to keep that, definitely keep that, and continuously improve if we can. And as advisors, we're all improving, right? So like, you know, you're 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. The longer you're an advisor, you're definitely improving that skill set. I'm just saying that we collectively and in an organized fashion need to stop relying on this above the line style of advice, which people are learning on the job, because you sit down and you talk to someone about their money, and then you figure out that money decisions are life decisions and life decisions are money decisions. And you realize that they're totally the same thing, and that to even try to separate them is kind of crazy. And I'm not saying you can't build a great business by just doing below the line stuff. I'm not saying that at all. But I am suggesting that you're probably limiting being profitable yourself as an advisor. You're probably limited to getting high net wealth clients, because that is you want the clients with the most amount of money to invest. You want the clients with the most amount of debt to get into for their house. You like where there's higher net assets, you can earn more revenue in that below the line advice. However, well, what about someone that is, say, my age and is earning much more than me? Because there's many of those out there. What are you doing for them? That's a huge portion of society that are earning well. They just haven't had the time to build the assets yet. And so, and what about the people that don't have a lot of assets and don't have a lot of income, but they still want financial advice, right? And so I guess limiting what you can do to people, which has a product attached to it, all it's doing is limiting your own capabilities as an advisor, if anything.
So do you think that the conversation is going to, so if we take like the below the line stuff, well, I think that will be like an expected given kind of, like you have to have that. There is no question about that. But is the conversation then shifting away from talking about your investment returns? It's shifting away from whether, how this product works and that product works. So that stuff, it gets done behind the scenes and it informs the advisor when they give advice. But the whole conversation in the meetings is more about life. It's more about how you want to do things. It's about why you want to do these things. Why are some things, and really unpacking that. Now I think about like I'm doing coaching and that. So, there's a lot of questions that are being asked to me that forces me to go into like thinking about certain things. And some of the things I've thought about and some of the things I've thought about long ago and never again. So you keep on revisiting this, like, why are you doing certain things and what is really, really important to you, and also how we view different things. So is that more where let's just take the typical financial planner meeting with a client? Do you think that that's where the conversation is going to go? And then, by the way, don't worry about all the other stuff. You're still okay. Or is there going to be still this conversation about investment returns and all of that together with this? So how is that practically playing out?
Yeah, I would definitely say that the below the line traditional financial planning does not need to be ignored. And I think it is ultimately should remain at least 50% of the conversation. I guess probably a really clear illustration of above the line and below the line would be, at least in this country, we do something called a fact find. And that's not necessarily written into the legislation that something is called a fact find. It's just what the industry adopted as a way to fulfill the requirements of the legislation, which said you must know your client. And so again, because advice was dictated to by external powerful stakeholders, then the goal became how to push someone through that know your client as rapidly as possible. And so as a really good example, I was 100% a product of the system. So coming again, super technical background. When I started my company, I would say to potential clients, I would say to them, bring in your what we call a tax file number, but it's essentially it's a identifier to our tax system. And the reason I would do that is because if the client brought in that number, then we could make a bunch of calls together and I could find out where all of their financial wealth was in a really easy and efficient way. And so because I thought financial planning was getting someone through that fact find process or that know your client as rapidly as possible so that we can provide a piece of recommendation and a formal piece of written advice so that I could get paid third party via a product, right? And so I did the most efficient way that I could imagine, which was, don't even find your statements. Literally just come in with your number and we'll just call this number. We'll find out where everything is and then we'll call all these and we'll work together. In about 45 minutes, we'll get your entire financial life in front of you. So I had a client turn up once, or a potential client prospect turn up, and we met and we talked for an hour. And I asked him, as I did after the hour meeting, are you ready to sign on to become a client? And he looks at me and he goes, no, but Clayton, I can tell you're a really nice guy. However, I never turned up to receive financial advice. And I was like, what? Why are you here? And he goes, it was so outrageous that someone would tell me to come to a meeting and bring a tax file number that I wanted to see if you were a scammer or not. I looked at him, and my whole like realization of I'm not doing this in a way that is getting the best outcome for a client. In fact, I'm doing it in such a bad way that someone's thinking I'm a scammer. Really dawned on me. And so, I mean, a recent podcast I've had is from a gent called Taborjan, and he spends 12 months doing the fact-find process. He charges for it. So what I considered, because I was trying to get to the formal piece of written advice as early as possible, what I considered as a hurdle to the advice process or a tick box, he has completely re-engineered. He now charges an ongoing retainer to thoroughly go through a process of understanding his client. I highly recommend going. It's a really recent podcast. Go back and listen to it. He's got a bit of a framework that he puts his clients, and they are clients, through. He's just not providing any immediate advice. And if you think about it, like the majority of advice is not time sensitive. I mean, it's good to get done as early as possible, but it's not urgent. And so as a part of his process, he goes, is there an urgent piece of advice that needs to get done? You know, is someone died? Is there a will? Is there inheritance? You know, or is someone, really ill, like, and is about to pass away? Like, except for those really kind of outlier events, there's no rush. And if we consider the role of the advisor is to get a happy and healthy client, reaching the goal of what they consider important, well then, and using money to do that, right? Then in no way, shape or form should an advisor be asking someone to bring nothing but a tax file number. Like that they should, it's almost ridiculous. And I am the worst case scenario of the ridiculousness of approaching it so transactionally. And I've now been exposed and learned over a few years that taking someone through a real journey takes time, that you need to build trust. There are deep questions that you need to ask that probably no one's asked them before. And so that journey, those questions is super valuable. And the fact that advisors aren't doing this enough, I think, tells me that we need to be more organized in what it is that financial advice provides, how it provides it, and how you get the outcomes that the clients want.
Yeah. So you said a very interesting thing to me is like you are a product of the system. And you've mentioned this a couple of times. You said it to me yesterday and this morning. I think you alluded to this as well, where you were saying, like, you know, it's like if you could have known some of these things earlier in your journey, it takes so long to learn these things. And that's why I was sort of leading in with, haven't we been doing this stuff for a long time? Well, yes, some people have, but they've only come to this point after years in the industry and realizing that there's something, it's like anything. As you go along, you learn there must be something better. There must be something better. And then, I mean, if you listen to Kate Holmes, you've been on her podcast. I've interviewed her and that. And also her story was like, but like people are asking me about different things, and you go on this journey and you start figuring out.
Yes.
So my question then becomes like, okay, so when you start off like brand new, I mean, go back to when you started in this business and you knew absolutely nothing about financial planning. I mean, you obviously know a little bit about budgeting and that kind of stuff, but you know nothing about the industry or the profession as such. How do we go about, like, I mean, how early on should new advisors be exposed to this? Because, I mean, there's lots that needs to be learned. There's systems, there's products, there's financial planning, there's all this above the line stuff. It's like, what do you think? How do we get this into their hands and into their minds and into their hearts, I guess, earlier than what is happening at the moment?
I think the sign of a really good advisor is when someone says, oh, you're a financial planner. Can you help me buy this stock? And then you respond with, yeah, I mean, I can help you do that, but what's the purpose? You know, why do you want to purchase this? Do you want to make short-term amount of money? Do you want to, is it interesting from an ego point of view, or you know, are you thinking about, this is what I want out of life and how do I go about achieving it? And so I think we need to ask advisors that same question. What's the purpose? Why are you an advisor? Are you, and realistically, people become advisors because they're good with numbers and they're good with people, right? So I got into accounting because I was good with numbers, but I was very, very dry. And so if you're good with numbers and then you're good with people as well, then I think that those people are just drawn into financial advice. And I think the majority of the time that when someone answers why they become an advisor, it's going to be to help people. And then what's weird is then the whole conversation changes and they go, okay, cool. Now this is how you recommend this product so that they can get this outcome. And I think the conversation, it's kind of quite easy. It's just not happening enough. The conversation should be, okay, you want to be a financial planner? Great. Now, how are you going to ask this person what they want out of life? Like that, it's very daunting. And there's no exact way to do it, but definitely having a framework and definitely having, you know, these really good advisors have access to these really good questions. And so I think we need to start, and it is the organization piece, because again, a lot of this stuff isn't unique or new or novel. It's just that we're kind of not entering this conversation. We're not introducing, I should say, this conversation to new advisors early enough. And for whatever reason, we're just waiting for them to catch up and learn it by themselves. But in the meantime, they could have delivered so much more value to so many more people that it makes no sense to wait. And so I think we should just, this is financial advice. This is below the line. You got to be the best in the world at that. And there's no reason why you shouldn't. And then this is above the line. And this is how you handle that emotional side of money. Because realistically, that's what financial planning is. It's handling the emotional side of money. It's not corporate finance. It's personal finance. And that whole personable bit, we don't spend enough time learning. We learn how to sell, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think if you do a better job with your marketing, there's less pressure to do with selling. And selling kind of enters into a relationship that's probably a little bit more driven by an outcome. If you can share your message to the world in the terms of marketing, and there's many ways to do good marketing, and that is a whole other conversation. I've seen some amazing advisors do some amazing things. So however you get people into your pipeline, and then I can definitely say the more that they know about you, the easier it is that sales meeting, right? So I used to do get that person in. They knew nothing about me except an email or two, and it was difficult. And I had a sales process, and that's what I thought soft skills was. I thought soft skills was learning how to sell and get someone to sign on the dotted line, but it's not. Soft skills is how to get the answers to the questions people have never been asked before out of them, and then attaching that to a financial imperative and then achieving a certain outcome. And it's not rocket science, but we need to have these conversations in a more clear fashion, which is why I really I've adopted the terminology below the line and above the line. I feel like that just very clearly articulates, because the problem is advisors don't know how to articulate it, right? So we don't even know how to explain we don't even know how to explain below the line to clients, let alone above the line. And so I think the clearer that this becomes, the conversation needs to be led by advisors, by the way. So podcasts like this or live streams like this are super valuable, because the more clarity that more advisors can get on what is advice, the more rapid the improvement to this profession globally will occur.
Yeah. And so, I mean, making this shift, there's a couple of times that you also said that there is a lot more value that we can add above the line, and I think a lot of clients, to be quite honest, are only expecting below the line stuff.
Yes.
And I think they expect below the line stuff, because they just expect one to come and like give them the latest and greatest product. I've seen that, where that is what they expect. So I guess on the one hand, it is also, making advisors aware that there's this above the line stuff, and that we can do so much more in order to add so much more value. And the moment you can add so much more value, suddenly you can charge in a different way.
Yes.
Suddenly you can earn money in a different way. Suddenly,
yes.
It's not linked to the size of a premium or an investment or something like that. But I guess at the same time, we need to educate the public and make them aware as to like, there's all these other things that we can do. But talking about that, so let's talk a little bit about pricing, or sort of maybe fee models or a business model that sits behind this. Because I think a lot of planners that, specifically if like we've been doing it like this for so long, it's all we know. So it's either commission or it's assets under management.
Yes.
Those are the two things. And I started in this industry in 1998, and I can tell you that it's been for a long time, but since 2004-5, there's really been this focus on building assets under management.
Yes.
That was the way to make your business sustainable. And I've talked about this in quite a few of my episodes, but there's no clear link between the value added and the outcomes and what you're earning on assets under management. Yes. So I personally believe that model is going to be under threat at some point in the future. It won't be today, it won't be in 5 years, but it'll be soon. Yep. But then what is the business model that underpins this from a financial planning point of view? If you're running a financial services business, how do you go about setting prices and fees and ways to pay? What can you?
Yeah, certainly. So I went through a huge evolution in my pricing model, and as a really easy high level tip, I love the word price, not fee. I only just recently learnt this. Derek, the virtual advisor, made a real point to me, and I fully agree with it. In that, if you're putting a fee in front of a client, then you're forced to explain the value that's attached to the fee. If you're putting a price in front of a client, the value is implied. And I thought that was a really nice positioning, which I think more accurately reflects financial advice as well. And that's just a small thing. So I went through many different evolutions of my pricing model. Started out entirely funds under management. Yeah, percentage base. I was charging 1% plus tax, I should say, for all of my clients. And that's how I charged. That's how I started, and I fully adopted that exact business model. My first, in fact, if I go back to where XY kind of started, it was when we found out that there was an advisor who was charging fixed fees plus funds under management. So it was a flat fee plus a percentage. And then we were, why? What's the rationale behind that, and where they get this idea from? And that really, that conversation was the birth of wow, there's a lot we don't know. We need to give something a title, and so everyone will share with us so that we can become better advisors, which is the premise for XY. And so, yeah, I went from 1% funds under management, and then I went to a flat fee plus 0.5% of funds under management. And then I eventually landed on totally flat fees. And I know every single argument for the pricing models, and I know the pluses and the minuses for all of it. And I don't really mind in terms of how an advisor earns their revenue. Basically, what the only thing that I would want to consider is, does the way that the revenue is earned reflect the value that you're supplying to the client? Now, I'm going to be really careful with that sentence, because what I don't want to, what I did was I just went, okay, I'm going to go to flat fee and percentage, right? So I'm going to halve my percentage and I'm going to average out what I usually earn and then just make it a flat fee. But I just did that because some other advisor was doing it. I had at that stage zero of this above the line service to add. And so I don't want to put the pressure on someone to do that. I would say, if you can get your advice to a position where you're spending a lot of time with your client to figure out what they want out of life and how to use their money to achieve it, and that can take 12 months before you even provide advice, right? And that can be a part of your ongoing service is, oh, this life event has occurred, right? That's going to put a dent in what we want to do. And so now we're going to move over here and we're going to try something else. I would just say that if your fee model, I caught myself there, pricing model.
There you go.
If your pricing model, it's new for me as well. I think if your pricing model doesn't reflect the value that you're providing to your client, then I think you should either do one of two things. I think you should really sit down and figure out how to provide more above the line service. And there's a lot, Advice That Sticks by Dr. Somers is a very good is a very good starting point. But there's a bunch of stuff out there these days, but I think that's a really good starting point. And I think if your pricing model reflects the value that you add to a client's life, I think by virtue of necessity, you will need a flat fee in there.
And I mean, if you have these flat fees, were they retainer based, or do they pay as they use the service? What was the how did you actually get paid for this?
Absolutely retainer. And the big difference that I would do now compared to then is I would do, and I learned this from Michael Kitsis. We on XY, we recently did a work from home tour, and he was saying that he's pushed the majority of his meetings now to digital. And the reason why he's done that is because rather than if someone's going to drive to your office, find parking, take time out of their day to get there and back, all of that combined means the weight or the importance of that meeting means you need to fill an hour at least. Like, how bad are you going to feel as an advisor if you got someone to spend an hour getting into your office, an hour to get out, and you meet with them for 10 minutes? It'd be almost rude, right? And so we're filling in the time because we want to make sure that it's worthwhile. And so Michael Kitsis has flipped that on his head, and so now what he does is shorter, more frequent meetings. And so I think you can move to a retainer model very easily by putting in more frequent meetings.
Yeah, so that's good advice and a simple way of actually going about doing that. I guess the other question is around this, and this will be difficult and will be different from country to country and area to area, even within countries possibly. But sort of setting that price, like at what level, how do you get to this is what I charge? Is it more of a trial and error kind of sort of way to see what people are willing to pay, or was there a sort of a premise? I don't know, people love asking, Clayton, is there a formula for this? So is there a formula to sort of work out your price, or how did you get to your price specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so without dodging the question at all, but I think that definitely relies on your ideal market. So if your ideal market has surplus cash flow, then you're probably going to aim to add more value, right? So you want to do more for people who can definitely afford it. Now, if your target market doesn't have a lot of surplus cash flow, then perhaps charging a large amount is not the correct thing, and perhaps adding in all this extra value isn't the right strategy. But I would say that in terms of, well, I think I heard once that if 1/3 of people say no to your price, you've arrived at the right amount for whatever your audience is. And I think the rationale with that is you're slowly increasing the price, and then eventually the two that end up taking the work means you end up with the same amount of revenue, even though the one person said no. And so you kind of reach a point where you're not doing as much work. I should say, actually, I'll rephrase that. I'd say you're spending more time with less amount of clients for the same level of revenue. And so I feel like that's probably a good sort of rule of thumb if you want to kind of come up with a formula. But definitely it depends on your audience.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think I said, like, if every single client says yes, then it means you're too cheap. If everybody says no, you're too expensive. But if 2 or 3 of them say no and 7 or 8 of them say yes, then like you're there.
Yeah.
So definitely. And it works like that in any business. I look at my daughter that just started her business. She does skincare and things like that. And it's the same thing, where do you set your level of prices? It's as easy as that. And we've got other family members who live elsewhere in the country, and they can't charge the same as what she can charge up here in Joburg, doing exactly the same thing, possibly using the same kind of products. It's crazy. But that's the fact. So your ideal client market, or maybe your existing client base as well, obviously, but then your ideal market, and you need to decide, do you want to shift? And I think often we feel bad if we need to decide, oh, maybe I'm not working in the right target market, to move to a new target market. Like, now I'm letting these people down, but It's not really like cutting that relationship. It's maybe just passing them on to somebody who wants to work in that, that's more, maybe somebody that's better suited to serve them. And then slowly but surely start changing your own practice. Yeah. So are there any kind of sort of training available currently, or things that, Dr. Moira Summers' advice that sticks, that book has come up in so many places that obviously that is one of the starting points, I guess, if you want to learn more about this. But are there some resources that you would say that people can listen to, read, watch, courses they can do, things like that will get them on this path to sort of go and offer things that are above the line in addition to what they're doing already?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I spend a huge part of my time in XY now, trying to answer. My goal is to organize this so that it stops being so ethereal. And I think something Kitz has said the other day was, if we want this above the line, he wasn't using this terminology, but if we want this above the line advice to be taken seriously, then we need to put it up against academic rigor. And I think that's a really good place to start. I know Vanguard's done some studies on this, on the evaluative advice, so has Russell. And so you can objectively look at it and say, okay, the evaluative advice does add a couple of percent. But in terms of where to start, now there is, I definitely would recommend that book. My goal is over the next maybe 1 or 2 years to pull the best thought leaders together on this exact topic and publish a book. But we can't skip ahead a couple of years. So from what I can tell, so I guess that's probably the best way to approach it. From what I can tell, there was recently a UK and an American combined summit, life planning summit, I believe it was called. The feedback I received from that was really positive. So that could very well be a great place to start. Carl Richards I'm not sure how often, if ever, he's been brought up. He has a fellowship. I've seen snippets of his work, and it is extremely this style of advice that we're talking about. However, I haven't actually completed any of the studies that or any of the courses that are out there as an advisor. And so it's very hard for me to endorse anything. But those two things, at my exposure level, look to be quite good.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good, because if we just have sort of, I think, a starting point, then, there's always like the one thing will lead to the next, will lead to the next. It's just like, where do I start? Where do I learn more about what this is about? Because I've asked the question to some other guests before, is that, I mean, where do we draw the line between life coaching and financial planning? And I asked, is this two separate things? Are they the same thing? Do they just work well together? Is lifestyle financial planning sort of life coaching at a new level because it includes money? So yeah, it's quite a wide area, and the question being, like, are we not treading onto the arena of the life and the business coach, for example, or is this actually again something different from that?
No, it's a great point. And I think, well, the one thing, okay, so a life coach or a therapist, their goal and their focus is entirely the psychological part. A financial planner has traditionally been solely the financial part. I would say just sheer numbers of advisors that have independently, as I mentioned before, over decades, stumbled into this above the line advice over time tells me that advice has the right to enter into life planning much more than life planning has the right to enter into financial planning. I've never heard, or maybe it's because it's not my field, but I've never heard of a financial planner, a life coach ending up as a financial planner. It's probably happened, but I've never come across it. But I do know, I would say the proof that that financial planning belongs into this realm of life planning, this life coaching, is simply just because of these pockets of advisors over decades coming to the same conclusion consistently. Tells me that we deserve to be there, definitely.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So yeah, if you don't mind, Clayton, I just want to mention. We've had a guest on the show before, and she's actually written a book, which I just want to make the audience aware of, if you don't mind. So it's Tanya Kunze. Our episode was titled "The Power of Positivity," and her book is available now on Amazon. So I saw this yesterday on LinkedIn. And I thought, let me just share this with the audience today. So yeah, that's quite cool. That she's written this book and it's now become available. So The Power of Positivity, you can get it on Amazon as a Kindle. You can also email her directly to get the actual book. But anyway, so I just wanted to share that. Let's just talk quickly a little bit about XY Advisor.
Sure.
And what is it about? How did it come about? I love these stories. I think it's amazing. You know how long I've thought about, should I or shouldn't I do something like this? And then I didn't know that XY existed. And then I learned about XY, obviously, from Kate, and then got involved. And then Louis van der Merwe got involved. And then you created the South African community page. And then I joined. And then, so there's all these things happening. But tell us a little bit about XY Advisor and what it's really about.
Yeah, real briefly, a bunch of advisors got together. We figured out we didn't know much about financial advice, and we needed to upskill rapidly. And we advisors know the best way to learn is from other advisors, I think. And that's because there's no external pressure. Like, one advisor can't get paid any money if you get better at advice, right? So it's an altruistic but I guess you would say practitioner to practitioner desire to lift the standards of advice. And so we simply, over many years, and so we never anticipated that we'd end up launching a social platform, right? Like, just over many years of facilitating an environment for advisors to share and learn from one another. It's as simple as that. We know that we started on LinkedIn maybe about 6 years ago. That was a bit sterile. I don't know, maybe it'd work now. I feel like LinkedIn's improved a lot. So we moved across to Facebook. We held it on Facebook for a few years, and we've decided to go international. Our own platform, purely so that we can separate the international conversation. We're still very early days. I wouldn't say that the product is fantastic by any means. It's version 1. We got a lot of plans. We're growing quite rapidly, and I would expect that. I mean, feel free to check it out. I would expect probably in the next maybe 2 years that this will be a very substantial, built for purpose product for the best advisors to share and learn from one another from all over the world. Because the way that we think about it is 50% is regulatory based. As an advisor, you've got your rules and regulations and your laws and your jurisdictions and your licensing and your qualifications, all of that stuff. And so that's really got to be centered on the individual country. However, there's so much more. All this above the line stuff. There's marketing, there's sales, there is cash flow, right? There's a bunch of things that we would consider international advice. And if you could probably draw the line down the middle and say half is international, half is specific to a country. And so we've currently got version 1 of separating the channel. The problem is, from an international point of view, that the main wall, so to speak, is so Aussie at the moment. It's because we're started in Australia. And so the main wall is very Australian. And that's just because, the vast majority of the members are Australian. We've opened up, it's really just beta launching the beginnings of the different countries that provide advice. But it's going to work a hell of a lot better in the future. But we certainly would recommend jumping on. And did you see the Choose Your Own Adventure onboarding video series yet?
Yeah, I did. It was absolutely fantastic. I think you used Asked Video or something to create that, if I'm not mistaken. But it was brilliant. It was brilliantly done. I like how they made it fun, and it was like these short little video clips. So you go like, you do this, and then it goes like to the next video and the next video. So it was brilliantly done.
Awesome.
I must say, I did enjoy that a lot. Yeah. See, now I'm glad I did watch it. That would have been awkward.
Which on the spot.
Yeah. So amazing. This is a free platform, right?
Yeah, totally free. And our plan is not to charge for it. Like, our business model is a combination of advertising, but we don't do advertising on the platform. Without going into the whole business plan, but we actually de-identify a conversation and use artificial intelligence to collect conversation that's occurring. Again, de-identify, use AI to then turn them into insights so that the product providers actually build products that solve advisor needs. And so if you think about what everyone does at the moment, everyone's on Facebook, and Facebook knows on average 5,000 data points about every single individual. And then they try to just jam as many advertisements on, right? We don't do that. We have no plans to do that. We want to do the opposite of that. We know 4 things about advisors, and then we actually allocate each advisor to one of 16 personas. And so everything's de-identified. But ultimately, we want when advisors to have a conversation about the positive evolution of financial advice, we want to make sure that not only advisors listen to that, but the products and services that build tools for advisors to help their clients are actually listening to that as well, but in a completely de-identified and ensuring privacy way. We're a little bit libertarian over here, so we want to kind of fight against the huge social media platforms as well.
Yes. And I think it's a good thing that you took this off into its own channel or its own product or own platform.
Yes.
Because there's so much noise, even LinkedIn, there's so many things just running through and there's so many different, like depending on who you connected to, whereas you go to XY Advisor, it's everything there is based on what we are interested in, things that we want to learn, and questions we can ask and things like that. So I think it's amazing. It's great stuff. Clayton, let me just have a look here quickly what some of the questions are that came in. I think we maybe addressed this one. So Neil said, hi, Clayton, can you elaborate on how you charge fees in your practice with 1 or 2 examples? I think we covered that.
Yes.
I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add.
No, I feel like we covered that earlier. I'm surprised the first question was, or wasn't, I should say, Clayton, are you really the giant that you look like on that thumbnail? Because when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, I look massive. I'd like the opposite of that. I think you guys in South Africa think we're big in the rugby side. No, I'm half the size.
No, we got to highlight the guest though. That's important. Then Vilma is just asking the link to there was a podcast that you mentioned. What was the guy's name?
Yes, so there's 2 podcasts in particular. So I'll quickly search for it right now. It's let's have a look.
So I guess it's obviously the one with David Haynes, which
was
episode 188.
Yes, that is a really good one. He's essentially he's the one that sort of introduced to me the concept of above the line and below the line. So that's 188. A former employee of his and has really taken this above the line approach to advice is 184 to Borgen.
184 to Borgen.
He's
okay,
very good.
So you can just simply go and search on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, any of the main platforms, Stitcher, Spotify. Just go look for XY Advisor. You can't miss it. So yeah, I can show you sort of what their logo or their cover art looks like. So it's not in focus there, but you can just go and search for XY Advisor, and you can then listen to it there. So 188 and 184. Is the 2 ones, and then you can have a look. I mean, there's obviously 186 other ones as well that you can.
Yeah, there's a bunch of series in there as well. Actually, it's a kind of an interesting series we did recently on that same channel, but we sort of start numbering them differently. But it's only, if you go back maybe 10 or 20 max podcasts, but there's actually a 10-part series on mental health. I thought that was a really interesting series. We actually have Moira Summers on there in that series, so awesome. Highly recommend that one as well.
Cool stuff. Razan is asking, Clayton, what tools do you use to present advice-related information to clients?
Yeah, so I used, I'm not sure if you guys have this over there, but it was My Prosperity. It was, they've improved it a lot, but essentially, ability to access bank accounts I found was really important. You would have goals that the bank account would then track how close that you're acquiring, on a day-to-day basis. So My Prosperity was very good, but I'm sure that there's an equivalent over there.
Yeah. 10 to 1, it's something like 22/7 or one of those products that we've got. But I mean, in terms of like presenting, when you sit with a client, sort of what did you give them, or did you do, like, if they sit with you, did you have a screen with some things that you shared with them, or did they get everything in hard copy, or, were most of your meetings actually virtual already? What was that process like? That's a really good question. So I will reiterate that I don't think that my process was fantastic as an advisor, and what I've learned since then, I would do a much better job. So I don't really want to answer the question in a way that I wouldn't even recommend. So I guess probably the best way that I can answer the question is how I would deliver advice now. I would definitely deliver advice via Zoom. I think it goes without saying. In fact, there are products out there that allow digital signatures just to be very simple. So video and then recording that and adding it as a record of the meeting, I think would be a really efficient and very compliant way to provide the advice. And then, like, I would do a presentation as well, a PowerPoint, if that helps at all. I would put together the key understandings
what the client wanted. But even then, it was so simplistic. It was, because my fact find meeting was an hour long, right? So I would do a much better job of it now, but I would probably still use a PowerPoint as well. Yeah. Oh, actually, I do have one really good tip. This is something I ended up doing. So in the document, when people had their goals, I wouldn't just write it as text. I would stylize it over a picture, right? Let's say I want to get married in 2 years. I would actually use the words that they used, and I would stylize it almost like an Instagram picture, right? And there's many apps that help you do that really quickly. I found that was a nice touch.
Okay, yeah, they make it a bit more visual, and good stuff. Neil was asking, how many clients would you say is optimal for a single advisor? There's many different views about this, but thinking about the retainer model and meeting more frequently, is there a number?
Yeah, I used to think you could handle 200. I don't think so anymore. I think 100 is quite substantial. And if you were meeting with them 3 times a year, maybe 4 times a year for a half an hour, maybe longer, but you would definitely have more than a handful of meetings every week, and that's not including new prospects, right? So I think 100 clients per advisor, and then do you want to bring on more advisors is the question.
Yeah. Because that depends on what you're building. So I see we've got Michelle Oskin with us this morning. So Michelle was my guest on Friday.
Cool.
She's Little Miss Wow, and she says agreed, need to be quality, not quantity. So if there's somebody you want to talk to on your podcast, I don't know if you know Michelle or if you've ever connected. So that's definitely somebody I can put you in touch with if you're interested. She is amazing.
Awesome.
So I'll definitely send you guys something to see if you can connect. And then Gary Walker is asking, how do you physically monitor the service offered to client? So if you are invoicing a client and the client disputes that, or they say that, listen, I didn't get any value from this, how would this be handled? Because I guess that's the one thing where somebody's paying you a retainer and then they say but I'm not getting what I expected. And has that ever happened to you?
So again, I never got to a point where I was delivering this advice. So it never happened to me. However, have I personally hired consultants to help me achieve a certain outcome that doesn't have a reporting measure attached to it? Yes, I have. Has that always been a good decision on my behalf? No, but that's because I didn't potentially get the best person for the job. If I had the best person for the job, which I'm advocating for to be the best person for the job, then the service that I the service that I wanted and paid for, if it was delivered in the way that it would have given me the outcome I delivered, even though it wasn't a reportable outcome, then it would have been absolutely fine. I mean, as a person who needs to get things done, I hire people. Yeah. And I think advisors kind of need to see themselves beyond the confines of a formal piece of written advice. I think we need to consider ourselves to be experts in helping people achieve what they want out of life and using money to get there. Yeah. And then in order to get there, then this is the process. And you've got to, I'm going to not lead you. I'm going to support you on a journey to achieve the outcomes that you already know, but you just don't know how to get there. And so it's the job of the advisor. And so that's hard. That's really hard to put a number and a figure next to. So to answer in this theoretical situation where someone wasn't happy with the outcome, that's definitely a tough position to be in. However, I think you need to have the contract sort of written up in such a way that your job is the process, your job is the journey, your job is the support through this framework. Maybe you need to be specific on who you put through that framework, right? Maybe it's not a case that every person would like to go through that framework. I'm not suggesting you throw your own gut judgment out the window. Like you can make this call. However, if you feel like someone can go through a process like this, then you can point to this was the framework that I promised, that I offered. This is what was delivered, the journey. It's such a shame that we didn't get to a conclusion, because most of the time we do. I think that would be how I would handle it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's some solid advice. Last question here comes from Nadia. So Nadia is asking, says she has great insights, love the presentation, fact-finding tool, and presenting goals. Do you know of templates available I can use for ideas of building my own for digital presentation?
Yes. So
starting point for that.
Yeah, so we've on XY we have it's again not well designed. It's actually a treasure trove of files that hundreds of advisors have uploaded over the years, and so it's called community resources. It's in the groups. I highly recommend going in there. It's kind of split up between different parts of the process as a way to get your hands sort of stuck into or exposed to, I guess, that free level of unstructured information. If you're happy to sort of go through and explore the files, I would recommend going there. I've uploaded a lot of my stuff over the years there. You know, I guess the concept is, one of the things in improving advice collectively across the world is there's IP. There definitely is IP, and IP is very important, but not everything's IP. Sometimes you can just help another advisor by formatting a document better, and it doesn't give you any competitive advantage. Yes. And I kind of believe that there's not enough advisors in the world for us to be competing anyway, realistically. So you'll find a lot of, on XY community resources in the groups. On the left-hand side, you'll see hundreds of files.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Clayton. Wow, yeah, I've run over time with about 7 minutes. That's how awesome this conversation was and how quickly the time went by. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and being with us. And by the way, so I didn't even mention at the beginning that you became a dad very recently for the first time. So congratulations from all of us here. May you become a little Springbok one day. We'll import him to South Africa. May he be bigger than you. But congratulations, and we wish you and your family well. And just thank you very much for everything that you shared with us today.
Mate, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Cool beans. Have a good one. Guys, I'll see you back on Friday, 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Have a lovely week. Cheers.